Hello everybody, this is Anything Third Person and welcome back to Alice Madness Returns. So, between last episode and this episode, there was actually about 20 minutes of footage that I could not retrieve because the recording program and the game and the audio recording program all decided to crash at the same time in a series of unfortunate events. So this commentary is actually not live, and you're going to see soon that this is just going to be kind of a filler episode explaining what happened previously. So, last episode we just started chasing the octopus, who's the writer for the theater, the play, or whatever it is. And basically, for 20 minutes, I chased an octopus around a junkyard of sorts. Yeah, that actually sums it up pretty nicely. I chased this octopus around for 20 minutes. It was kind of fun, but it was mostly just platformers, and you know how much I love jumping puzzles. So you really didn't miss much. But what happened at the end was that once you chase the octopus for long enough time, he eventually stops and then gives you the work, or he says he's going to deliver the script to the play, or the guy managing the play. So then after that, we come here. And this is where we meet a bottlefish who claims that he can't sing because he can't hear the music coming out of the speakers or something like that. So, since my live recording actually is corrupted and I can't retrieve it, you're going to have to deal with the post-production narration for this episode. So I apologize if that doesn't quite give you the effect of being in the moment, but hopefully this is only a one-time thing, and hopefully it will never happen again, because it's quite frustrating. So here I am Alice, and the quest was I need to go and activate these speakers. And of course, if you know anything about Alice Madness Returns quests, every big quest needs to be accompanied by a big battle. And that's exactly what I'm about to walk into. So this first entrance that I went through, I'm going to be fighting a cannon crab and a bunch of insidious ruins. So I actually didn't expect the battle. I mean, I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't expect this. And if you remember from last episode when I first started fighting the cannon crab, I commented on how difficult the combat is going to start becoming once the cannon crab is paired up with other sorts of enemies. So here we have the most basic, which are the insidious ruins, and the newest enemy, which is the cannon crab. Now it is actually really difficult to go into aim mode and block all of the cannon crab's attacks while you're running around in combat. So the strategy I figured out, the strategy I figured out in the middle of all of this was to just get rid of all the insidious ruins first and then attack the cannon crab. Now as you noticed, I was pretty messy back there, and it was mostly because I was trying to just compensate for not actually expecting that kind of a battle. Usually it takes me a couple of battles to become familiar with what I need to do. And that actually leads me to, the death leads me to another commentary about the game, which is that, I don't know if you guys remember, but if you remember the very first time I was having checkpoint concerns was at the part where the cat says something about the 9 lives, and I was supposed to hop over 2 steam vents and over into a Kaboingan mushroom and into the Dormouse's lava pit. That checkpoint I think was actually intentional. I made a joke saying, I bet the developers thought, hey, why not in nightmare mode have the checkpoints be really, really terrible? So I think the developers actually meant those checkpoints to happen. I don't think it was the intention to create frustrating checkpoints, but that's what it became. The walk from all the way from the beginning of the level to here is not that long. But when you keep dying in combat over and over, having to listen to the quest again, having to climb up the stairs, it seems like a chore later on. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to do this particular sequence as many times. I had to do the Kaboingi mushroom jump or some of the other fights that I had to do. But I think it's still worth noting that the checkpoints are not well placed for a modern title. And I believe this is a PS3 title, so this is fairly recent generation. Now, combat, once I figured out what was going to happen, it was very easy to be mentally prepared to go in and just kind of wreck things. So you see right here, I've developed a trick called Hit and Run Alice, which is me running around placing clockwork bombs all over the place and just keep running in a circle while avoiding missile damage. And eventually, even if I'm not hitting anything for every single bomb that I throw, I still hit things, and eventually I'm gonna clear all the insidious ruins. So that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm running, throwing bombs, running, activating bombs, and just collecting health and teeth, etc. So the combat does get a little bit dragged on, but it's okay. That is the nature of the nightmare difficulty level combat of Alice Madness Returns. So one of the concerns I had about the nightmare difficulty is that the combat just is too long. And it's not difficult. It doesn't make it more difficult necessarily. It just means the game is less forgiving of mistakes. So one of the flaws when so you see me die right there, I was starting to get very sloppy because I was getting worn down. So one of the mistakes that a lot of developers make when creating various difficulty levels is just to turn the enemies into bullet sponges. And that's kind of a term for enemies who are not necessarily more difficult, but they just take much more damage to kill. Now, sometimes it translates to difficult, but most times it just translates to you just need to apply more damage to the enemies, so combat is naturally going to take more time. It may not necessarily mean it's going to be more difficult, but you know that from normal to nightmare, it's going to take a lot longer time to kill all the enemies. So the trademark of this particular title, Alice Madness Returns, is every enemy does one specific thing. Not one specific thing, but it's very easy to predict their moves. So for example, the Insidious Ruins will kind of charge up and there'll be an orange aura around them right before they attack. And that way you know that you need to get out of it. The cannon crabs, they hit their cannons a couple of times and light it up. And you can see the missiles about 3 or 4 seconds before they fire. So the enemies are very predictable. It's just that, as a human player, you're open to mistakes all the time. Whether it be hitting a wrong key, throwing your attacks at the wrong time, not hitting your umbrella at the exact time that it needs to bounce. Sometimes the game bugs out and it clips you in place with the enemies, and that counts as a death. So a lot of things didn't really go into consideration, I think, when they were designing the difficulty levels of Alice. So I think that's one of my biggest criticisms of this particular title, is that combat becomes kind of bland and predictable and drawn out. So this next sequence I had actually a lot of trouble with. The next about 10 minutes is gonna be a montage of me dying in this arena, and I decided to include it just to show you that a game's difficulty level should not necessarily turn into progression wall. So you've seen me come all this way. I've gone very, very far without dying that many times per combat. Usually, on particularly difficult combat sequences, I'll die 2 or 3 times, and eventually I would get it. Whether by sheer luck or by just familiarity with the combat, I would eventually get it. So here, I have to battle 2 snarks and a menacing ruin at the same time. And it's very difficult to fight all of those things because you can't get up and close to any of those things. So the best chance that you have is to run around, throw clockwork bombs, or use the pepper grinder on the ice snarks until they burrow themselves into the ground, and then smash them with the horse hammer. So there's a lot happening. Even though there are only 3 enemies to fight, it's a mechanically demanding sequence, in my opinion, because one small mistake could potentially make you start this sequence all over again. And these ice snarks are tough. They just take a lot of damage to kill. Again, there's really not a lot of room for error. So which brings me actually to one of my... Oh look, see, clip. Anyway, and that brings me to another concern that I have with the direction that the combat sequences are going. So, and I've said this many times in the past, and I'll say it again. Combat is so fluid and so well designed that it's such a shame that the enemies aren't on par with that. The enemies are predictable and they move in an exact pattern, which means you can pretty much predict the outcome of the fight by the first few seconds and kind of looking at the area. So right now, Alice is actually in an unbelievably small arena. You can't really tell as a watcher, but when you're inside the game playing, you can definitely tell right away, because if you notice, every single combat sequence was basically me running around in a big circle and applying damage to whatever is in the middle of the circle. Which means if the area was smaller, I would have less room to do that. And it gets it gets chaotic, because things are jumping at you, things are being thrown at you, you could be frozen in place, things are leaping at you from the other side of the battlefield. And in the midst of all of this, you have to somehow apply enough damage to destroy all of them. And you see just right there, Alice actually clipped into a particle or something, and she got locked into place. So little things like that can make gameplay frustrating. Added onto the fact that in Nightmare difficulty level, it's just simply very difficult to kill enemies because there's so much health. Now, I did go into this particular battle with only, I think 5 roses, 6 roses, something like that. Which means I could take 2 hits, and that was it. So I would take 1 hit, 1 fireball hit, and 1 little chomping jump attack from an ice snark, and that would be it. Which means I could make 2 mistakes. No, actually, it means I could only make 1 mistake throughout the course of combat. And that is the definition of unforgiving, I think. Because there is so much going on in so little space. I wish I could commentate on every single death that I have shown in the montage, but I simply can't. And, I decided to include it because, 1, I just wanted to show you how much difficulty I'm having trying to get past the sequence. I've spent about 3 or 4 hours in this particular sequence, and I still cannot get through it. And if you remember, I haven't had this much trouble in any area. So, we're at 25-30% of the game, so I guess this is a good place to start hitting those progression walls and actually rely on skill. So, hopefully by next episode I'll be able to get through that sequence and move on with the story. So But despite all the criticisms that I've been giving in this episode, I am still enjoying this Alice Madness Returns experience. It is a refresher from the first game. It is, still part of the same story and the same universe, but it's gotten a lot of improvements, and I am still very impressed by it. So, here is, to me, just praying that in the next episode, or by the end of next episode, I'll be able to get through this combat sequence and move us through the actual storyline. Alright, well, thank you for bearing with me this episode. Hopefully next time my recording programs won't all simultaneously crash along with the game, and we can move on through the story without any more problems at all. You've been watching Alice Madness Returns, and this is Anything Third Person signing out. See you guys next time.